Chapter 8, Scheduling Projects. This particular chapter has some very fundamental information, as you might guess, in regard to scheduling and the different techniques that are available to you and the reasons behind them and the relative strengths and weaknesses of the various techniques. So here again, if you put yourself in the shoes as a project manager, the way or the tools that you use and the way you end up scheduling projects should be specific to the unique characteristics of a project. So bear that in mind as you work through this. I'm going to give a kind of a brief overview of some of the highlights here. Remember, this is no substitute for reading the chapter. That's highly important, and you're going to make application this week too. Okay, so we're not going to do that. So there's the scheduling of projects, the layout. There's the overview in the text. Core Agile examples, project schedule management. So project time management process. So here's, as you might guess, this becomes critical to all management because of the nature of sort of a waterfall approach. One activity flows into the next, but activities might be sequential or they might be in parallel, meaning 3 or 4 things are happening at the same time, but they still need to be timed in such a way that you don't have downtime or too much slack in the schedule. And slack is just the idea that there's not spare time is probably the wrong way to say it, but just interludes or breathers that are unavoidable in the schedule, because you want to keep everybody as busy as possible, but sometimes, especially when it comes to Agile, you might need that slack in order to account for changes as necessary. Okay, so typical questions to answer in developing a project schedule. I'm not going to read all of these to you, but it just shows you that the possibility for variations is fairly large and not inconsequential. So as you think about this, read through these, and there's a million ways to fail at this because there are unknowns in every schedule, and things pop up, unknowns, unintended consequences. You might have progressed more quickly. That can cause trouble as well, or disruption in the planning. That's a good problem to have, but it might in fact be a problem. Scheduling is a highly desirable activity, and there's jobs all over the place for schedulers. You just talk to any doctor's office or dentist's office or any place that schedules appointments. So here's PERT and critical path method. These are they're similar, but they have some distinct strengths and weaknesses, which you're going to identify soon enough. But these are worth considering. And like I said, it's not an either or necessarily. You might combine a little bit of both, but it's important to adhere to the strengths of a project given the characteristics of the project or the scheduling. And the more commonly used method is activities on node, or AON. So precedence diagramming. And it's the visualization of time management. There it is right there. So when I was talking about parallel, A to B and C is a parallel. A, B to D is series. So that's what I was trying to say before. Constraints, so logical order, activity duration, resource availability, imposed dates, and cash flow. Cash flow can be a very important element in this. So common methods for creating a schedule. Identify all activities. What needs to get done? I'm personally working on a project right now, and I am, by design for me at least, I'm ahead of schedule because the system allows me to do that. Because I know there are going to be interruptions and activities that I can't account for. They're going to eat up my time, as it moves along, and it kind of helps out the person or the company I'm working for. But what's the logical order? What order should you do it in? And we're going to talk down the road a little bit about learning curves. when you do something over and over again, or you get good at it and it takes you less time. So learning curves can be part of that. So time required for an activity can change. And it's often difficult to estimate the time it takes to complete an activity, especially the first time through. So resources to different activities. Sometimes money can make up for schedule deficiencies. Imposed dates. Imposed dates may make sense, but they may be, hey, this is drop dead. We promise this. This is contractual. And budget, cash flow, quality demands. The higher the quality requirements, the longer things tend to take. Project manager's responsibility. I got a lot of it here. Essentially, just to break all these down, and there's 6 of them here, it's to communicate, to make sure that people that understand the critical nature of schedulings of milestones, of critical dates, but also have the resources to hit those milestones. So define activities, what needs to be done. That work breakdown structure is important in this regard. So college fundraiser project. So they use this as an example. All of these are things that have to be done. Okay, and you could use this for pretty much anything. But it takes time to really dissect this, or the project, to come up with all the critical things. And this is where experience can have a huge impact on the accuracy of planning. So more details for you. I'm not going to read through all these. You can look at them. So sequence, predecessor, and successor. Predecessor is something that happens before, precedes an activity. Successor follows. So it's a logical sequence. But it's good to understand those terms. Dependency types, mandatory dependency, discretionary dependency. So a logical relationship, discretionary, it's best judgment. That's what discretionary means. Upgrade project. And then, again, I'm going fairly quickly here, but lead and lag. Lead comes from before, lag is afterwards, something that might be affected down the road, or something that's a leading indicator, potentially, that accelerates an activity. Alternate dependencies, finish to start, finish to finish, start to start, start to finish. Again, acquaint yourself with these definitions, in that they'll help you explain things. And when you do lay out a project, it can help you, better account for activities. So creating good estimates, learning curve. So here's where we get creating good estimates, work breakdown structure. Here again, and the one I want you to look at specifically is number 4, which include appropriate contingencies. That's a what if. What if this happens? It's not intended, but it's like contingencies are a plan B. That's you can't buy life insurance after you're dead, kind of a thing, or fire insurance when smoke's pouring out your house. These are things you plan for. You don't want to happen necessarily, but there are contingency plans, and it's hard to do those under pressure. So estimates in days. Estimates are hard. How long is it going to take? And, the more accuracy you can have to this, and this is where learning curves matter so much. Different exhibits. So learning curves. If you put together, let's say you buy a bookshelf and there's a lumber and a bunch of fasteners in a bag and directions that are maybe in English, but maybe just pictures, and they're not really that clear. If you do one of those, it's going to take you a while. That first one's going to take a while. The second, third, fourth, and fifth, by the time you get to the 5th one, you're rocking. That's learning curve. And the flatter, the better, meaning that speeds it up. The steeper, it just takes longer. So that's usually how that's referenced. So velocity, sum of estimates of delivery per iteration. Iteration is just a step. Okay? So critical path, the easiest possible, determines the project's earliest possible end date, most critical in terms of time, to-pass method, and the enumeration. So, as you look at this, as you read through this, account for those things. So forward pass, backward pass, as you might guess. And here's a diagram that shows you how these estimates can be laid out. Two-pass method. Total float and free time, or slack. That's a term I'm computer critical math path based on float, slack. I'm more used to the term slack versus float. So uncertainty, and there's different ways to account for that. Estimate range of possible times. So you get a optimistic versus pessimistic is another way to think about it. You've got an optimistic, this is how long it could take under ideal conditions. This is pessimistic. And that, again, comes with experience. Per considerations gives you advantages, disadvantages. You're going to do a little work on that this week. Monte Carlo simulation, computerized mathematical technique that allows people to account for risk in quantitative analysis and decision making furnishes the decision maker with a range of possible outcomes and probabilities. You've got to feed the probabilities in, though. So again, this can calculate it, but it's an estimate. These aren't hard numbers per se, meaning they've already happened. Software and skill required. There you go. Much more realistic, but it can be, and here's an example, schedule in China. So Gantt charts, easy to understand tool, horizontal bar. Again, it's representing scheduling. Teams, allocating, sequencing resources, optimizing, communication. Again, this should roll you back to what we talked about in the past of how vivid or valid or important communication truly is. And I think that's probably as far as we need to go. This gets a little bit repetitive from here, but so as you study and as you read, take notes. Take into account, put yourself in the shoes of a project manager. That's probably the best way to look at this. And think of a project that you maybe have done in the past and how estimates can be wildly off time-wise, or why they're accurate.